Millionaire woman catches single father security guard studying in the dark. What happens next shocks everyone. Before we get into it, if this video found you at the right moment, let me know with your favorite emoji. The fluorescent lights of Riverside Corporate Tower flickered off one by one as the clock struck 11 p.m. on this cold December evening in Chicago. Marcus Thompson adjusted his navy blue security uniform and began his final rounds, his footsteps echoing through the marble lobby adorned with Christmas decorations that seemed to mock his financial struggles. At 32, he'd been working double shifts at Sterling Enterprises for 3 years now, ever since his ex-wife Sarah left him with their 6-year-old daughter Emma and a mountain of legal fees that seemed to grow larger each month. The building was a testament to success and prosperity. 40 floors of gleaming offices where deals worth millions were made daily. Marcus knew every corner, every emergency exit, every security camera. But tonight, like every night for the past month, he wasn't alone on his shift. "Daddy, I finished my math homework," Emma whispered from behind the security desk, her small fingers clutching a worn pencil that was more eraser than lead. The little girl had been coming to work with him every night since their babysitter, Mrs. Chen, quit last month to take care of her own grandchildren. Marcus couldn't afford another babysitter, not with rent due in 2 weeks and Emma needing new shoes before school started again after winter break. "That's my smart girl," Marcus smiled, his voice warm despite his exhaustion. He knelt beside her makeshift study area, which consisted of cardboard boxes he'd salvaged from the building's recycling room. Under the dim emergency lighting that was all he dared use after hours, Emma's homework was spread across these improvised desks. Her reading book, The Cat in the Hat, was held together with clear tape, and her purple backpack had more patches than original fabric. Marcus had tried everything to create a better study environment for his daughter. He'd positioned 2 office chairs he'd found in storage to give her proper seating, and he'd even brought a small pillow from home so she could nap comfortably when her eyelids grew heavy around midnight. The security office had become their second home, a place where father and daughter bonded over spelling words and math problems, while the rest of the city slept. "Daddy, this word is hard," Emma said, pointing to elephant in her reading workbook. E-L-E. L-E-P, elephant. Perfect pronunciation, Em. "You're getting so good at sounding out the big words," Marcus praised, his heart swelling with pride. Despite their circumstances, Emma was thriving academically. Her teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had mentioned during parent conferences that Emma was reading above grade level and showed exceptional problem-solving skills in mathematics. What Marcus didn't notice was the shadow moving on the 32nd floor high above them. Victoria Sterling, CEO and founder of Sterling Enterprises, had returned to retrieve important documents for tomorrow's crucial board meeting with potential investors from Japan. The 58-year-old billionaire rarely worked this late, but the merger deal that could expand her renewable energy empire across Asia required her personal attention and signature on several time-sensitive contracts. Victoria had built her fortune from nothing, starting with a small solar panel installation business in her garage 30 years ago. Now, Sterling Enterprises was valued at over $2 billion, with offices in 12 countries. She was known in business circles as brilliant but ruthless, someone who could spot talent and opportunity from miles away, but had little patience for excuses or weakness. As she headed toward the executive elevator, her Louboutin heels clicking against the Italian marble floors, Victoria heard soft voices drifting from the lobby 32 floors below. The building's acoustics were excellent, designed that way for the impressive presentations held in the main conference room. Curiosity piqued. She moved to the glass railing that overlooked the atrium and peered down into the dimly lit lobby. What she saw made her freeze in place, her hand gripping the cold steel railing. A man in a security uniform was patiently helping a small child with her homework, using his phone's flashlight to illuminate the pages when the emergency lighting proved insufficient. The dedication in his voice carried clearly in the empty building as he explained basic addition to his daughter, using gentle encouragement and infinite patience that reminded Victoria of her own father, who had died when she was Emma's age. "If you have 3 apples and I give you 2 more apples, how many apples do you have total?" Marcus asked, using actual apple slices from his lunch to demonstrate the math problem. 5, Emma announced proudly, carefully counting each piece of fruit. "That's right. You're getting so good at addition, sweetheart. Soon you'll be helping me with my math homework." Victoria's heart clenched. Something about this scene reminded her of her own childhood struggles, when her single mother worked 3 jobs to keep them afloat after her father's death in a construction accident. But there was something else. Something in the way the security guard explained mathematical concepts that suggested he understood far more than basic arithmetic. She found herself unable to look away as the man helped his daughter organize her school papers. With the same methodical precision she'd seen in her best project managers, there was an intelligence in his movements, a systematic approach to problem-solving that spoke of education and training, far beyond what his current position might suggest. As Victoria watched this tender scene unfold, she had no idea that what she was witnessing would challenge everything she thought she knew about the people who worked in her building, about success and failure, and about the thin line between prosperity and poverty that could be crossed by anyone, at any time, for any reason. The discovery she was about to make would change not just her own life, but the lives of this devoted father and his remarkable daughter, in ways that none of them could possibly imagine on this cold December night in Chicago. Victoria couldn't tear herself away from the scene unfolding 32 floors below her executive office. She found herself settling into one of the leather chairs from the nearby conference room, unconsciously making herself comfortable as she continued to observe this unexpected late-night study session. She watched as Marcus helped Emma sound out words from the tattered Dr. Seuss book, his patience infinite despite the obvious exhaustion evident in his shoulders and the dark circles under his eyes. The little girl's giggle echoed through the empty lobby when she successfully read a difficult sentence about the cat's mischievous adventures. The pure joy in that sound made Victoria smile for the first time in weeks. Her own life had become a series of board meetings, profit reports, and strategic decisions that affected thousands of employees, but rarely brought her personal happiness. "Daddy, why do we have to study here?" Emma asked innocently, her 6-year-old mind beginning to notice that her nightly routine was different from her classmates. Jenny's mommy has a big desk at home with lots of bright lights and fancy pencils, and Tommy has his own computer in his room. Marcus's jaw tightened slightly, and Victoria could see him struggling to find the right words. She leaned forward unconsciously, invested now in hearing how this father would handle such a loaded question from his innocent daughter. "Because we're saving money for something very special, sweetheart," Marcus said carefully, his voice steady despite what Victoria could see was internal pain. "Remember our dream about the house with the yellow front door that we saw in that magazine at the doctor's office?" Emma's eyes lit up like Christmas morning, and she clapped her small hands together with excitement. "With the big garden where I can plant sunflowers and tomatoes? And the swing set in the backyard?" "That's exactly right, baby girl. And there's going to be a special room just for you to do your homework, with a real desk and a lamp that's bright enough to read all your favorite books," Marcus promised, his voice thick with emotion. "Every night we study here gets us one step closer to that dream house." Victoria felt tears welling in her eyes as she realized the magnitude of sacrifice this man was making. He was working security at night, probably had another job during the day, and was still managing to create a positive, hopeful environment for his daughter despite circumstances that would break most people. As Marcus pulled out a peanut butter sandwich wrapped in aluminum foil, Victoria noticed how he carefully cut it into neat triangles with a plastic knife, giving Emma the larger pieces while taking only small bites for himself. His entire lunch looked like it was meant for one person, stretched to feed two. The sandwich was accompanied by a bruised apple, also carefully divided, and a small thermos of what appeared to be powdered milk mixed with water. "Mrs. Patterson from apartment 4B gave us extra chocolate chip cookies today," Emma announced excitedly, pulling out 2 homemade cookies wrapped in a paper napkin. "She said they were getting stale, but they taste perfect to me." "That's because you helped her carry her groceries up 3 flights of stairs yesterday," Marcus replied, his voice warm with pride as he watched his daughter's face light up. "Mrs. Patterson is 83 years old, Em. Those bags were heavy for her. Kindness always comes back to us when we least expect it, but we should never do kind things just because we expect something in return." Victoria made a mental note to research who Mrs. Patterson was, and whether there might be ways to help this elderly woman who was clearly looking out for Marcus and Emma. But first, she needed to know more about this Marcus Thompson. Something in his manner of speaking, his way of explaining concepts to his daughter, and his methodical approach to organizing their study time, told her this security guard was hiding depths that would surprise everyone who met him. "Daddy, will you help me practice my spelling words?" Emma asked, pulling out a list of vocabulary words that Victoria could see were quite advanced for a first grader. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's start with the first one. Can you spell because?" As Emma carefully spelled out each letter, Victoria noticed that Marcus wasn't just helping his daughter memorize the words. He was explaining their etymology, their prefixes and suffixes, and how they connected to other words they'd learned. This wasn't the vocabulary coaching of someone with limited education. This was the systematic, comprehensive approach of someone with deep knowledge of language and learning theory. The more Victoria observed, the more questions arose in her mind. Who was Marcus Thompson really? How had he ended up working security in her building? And why did she have the growing suspicion that his current job was a dramatic underutilization of his actual capabilities? What she discovered in HR records the next morning would shake her understanding of sacrifice, determination, and the power of a father's love to overcome seemingly impossible obstacles. But more than that, it would force her to confront uncomfortable truths about opportunity, privilege, and the arbitrary nature of success and failure in America. The investigation Victoria was about to undertake would reveal a story so compelling, so heartbreaking, and ultimately so inspiring that it would change her entire perspective on what it meant to be truly wealthy. The next morning, Victoria arrived at her office earlier than usual, her mind still processing the scene she'd witnessed the night before. Her first call was to Janet Morrison, her head of human resources, requesting the complete personnel file for Marcus Thompson. What she found when Janet arrived with the thick folder made her hands tremble slightly as she turned each carefully organized page. This wasn't just any security guard working double shifts to make ends meet. This was a man whose story would challenge everything Victoria thought she knew about talent, opportunity, and the circumstances that could derail even the most promising futures. Marcus Anthony Thompson had graduated summa cum laude from Northwestern University with a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering. His transcripts showed a 3.94 GPA and glowing recommendations from professors who described him as exceptional, brilliant, and destined for groundbreaking work in renewable energy systems. Dr. Patricia Williams, his senior thesis advisor, had written a particularly compelling recommendation letter stating that Marcus's innovative solar panel efficiency research showed the kind of revolutionary thinking that occurs perhaps once in a generation. But the accolades didn't stop there. Marcus had been accepted to graduate school at MIT with a full scholarship to pursue his master's degree in sustainable energy engineering. His undergraduate thesis on improving solar panel efficiency in urban environments had been published in the Journal of Renewable Energy Systems and had been cited by researchers across the globe. At 26, Marcus Thompson had been positioned to become one of the leading voices in the fight against climate change. Victoria continued reading, her heart sinking as the story unfolded. Emma had been born 3 months premature during Marcus's first semester of graduate school. The medical bills mounted quickly. Emma spent 4 months in the neonatal intensive care unit, requiring specialized care that even good insurance couldn't fully cover. Marcus had taken a leave of absence from MIT to be with his daughter and to work full-time to pay the mounting medical expenses that reached nearly $300,000. When Emma finally came home, she required ongoing therapy and medical monitoring. Marcus had planned to return to graduate school the following year, but Emma's mother, Sarah, was struggling with postpartum depression and the stress of their financial situation. Marcus made the difficult decision to defer his graduate program another year to provide stability for his family and to continue working to pay down their debt. That deferral became permanent when Sarah left 2 years later. Victoria found copies of the divorce papers, and her heart ached as she read Sarah's statement to the court, claiming she couldn't handle the stress of Marcus's financial struggles and Emma's ongoing medical needs. She had abandoned her husband and daughter, leaving Marcus with full custody, no support, and debts that seemed insurmountable. Victoria discovered that Marcus had applied to dozens of engineering firms over the past 3 years. She found copies of rejection letters that all cited the same concern: his significant employment gap and lack of recent engineering experience. Companies wanted engineers who could hit the ground running, not someone who would need time to update their knowledge after years away from the field. The most heartbreaking discovery was a folder labeled Professional Development. Marcus had been studying for his professional engineering license during Emma's nap times, and after she went to sleep, using library books because he couldn't afford the review courses that cost $2,000. He had notebooks filled with hand-copied practice problems and carefully drawn diagrams, showing that he was teaching himself advanced engineering concepts that most practicing engineers paid thousands of dollars to learn. Her assistant knocked softly on the office door. "Mrs. Sterling? The quarterly budget meeting with the board members is scheduled to start in 10 minutes. They're all here." "Cancel it," Victoria replied without looking up from Marcus's file. "Cancel everything on my schedule today. Tell them I have an urgent personal matter that requires my immediate attention. But Mrs. Sterling, the Japanese investors are calling this afternoon about. Janet can handle the investors. I trust her judgment completely. I need today to investigate something that could be far more important to this company's future than any single deal. That evening, Victoria returned to the building at 10:30 p.m., her heart racing with anticipation and nervousness. She had spent the day researching not just Marcus's background, but also learning about the challenges facing single parents in America, the barriers to re-entering professional careers after employment gaps, and the systemic issues that kept talented people trapped in survival mode. She took the stairs to avoid the elevator's distinctive ding and positioned herself in the same observation spot as the night before. Once again, Marcus and Emma were there in their improvised classroom, huddled around their cardboard box desks under the dim emergency lighting. Tonight, Emma was struggling with a science worksheet about the solar system, specifically about planetary orbits and gravitational forces. As Victoria watched, Marcus began explaining these complex concepts using salt shakers, a coffee cup, and his keychain as visual aids. His explanation was so clear, so methodical, and so scientifically accurate that Victoria found herself taking mental notes. Jupiter is the biggest planet in our solar system, Emma announced proudly after successfully identifying it on her worksheet. That's absolutely right, and do you know why Jupiter has so many moons orbiting around it? Marcus asked, genuinely excited to share advanced scientific knowledge with his 6-year-old daughter. Victoria watched in amazement as this brilliant man, who should have been designing next-generation solar systems or developing revolutionary clean energy solutions, taught his daughter about astronomy using condiment packets and office supplies. The injustice of it all made her chest tight with emotion and righteous anger at a system that could waste such extraordinary talent. But Emma's next innocent question would reveal something that would change Victoria's entire perspective on wealth, success, and what truly mattered in life. It would also plant the seed of an idea that would transform not just Marcus and Emma's future, but potentially the future of sustainable energy research itself. "Daddy, are we poor?" Emma asked quietly, her small voice carrying clearly through the empty lobby with the innocent directness that only children possess. Marcus froze completely, his hand halfway to adjusting the makeshift lighting system he'd created with his phone and a small mirror he'd found in the lost and found box. Victoria held her breath 32 floors above, her heart pounding as she waited to hear how this devoted father would handle such an innocent yet devastating question from his 6-year-old daughter. The silence stretched for what felt like an eternity. Victoria could see Marcus's internal struggle playing out in his body language, the way his shoulders tensed, how he carefully set down Emma's science worksheet, and the deliberate breath he took before responding. This was clearly a conversation he'd been dreading but knew was inevitable. "What makes you ask that, sweetheart?" Marcus asked gently, pulling Emma onto his lap with infinite tenderness. His voice was steady, but Victoria could see the pain in his eyes even from her distant vantage point. "Well," Emma began, her 6-year-old mind processing complex social dynamics with startling clarity. "Tommy Henderson at school said only poor kids eat peanut butter sandwiches every single day, and his mom volunteers in the lunchroom, and she told Mrs. Rodriguez that she feels sorry for the kids whose parents can't afford the hot lunch program." Victoria felt her heart breaking as she realized Emma had been subjected to the casual cruelty that adults often inflicted without thinking about the children who might be listening. "And yesterday, when we went to the grocery store, I heard you tell the cashier lady that you couldn't buy me the sparkly notebooks I wanted because we had to stick to essentials this month. Sarah's daddy buys her new notebooks whenever she wants them, and she has a whole collection of gel pens in every color." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, and Victoria could see him carefully choosing his words with the precision of an engineer solving a complex equation. She found herself leaning forward unconsciously, desperate to hear how he would navigate this impossible conversation. "Emma, do you know what rich really means?" Marcus asked finally, his voice warm despite the obvious difficulty of the topic. The little girl shook her head, her curls bouncing as she looked up at her father with complete trust and expectation. "Most people think rich means having lots of money to buy things, but I think rich means having everything you need to be happy and to become the best person you can be. We have each other, don't we?" "Yes, Daddy, we have the best hugs in the whole world." "That's right, and we have your books, and this warm, safe place to study every night, and Mrs. Patterson's cookies sometimes when we help her with her groceries. And peanut butter sandwiches," Emma added enthusiastically, making Marcus smile genuinely for the first time Victoria had seen that evening. I actually like peanut butter better than hot lunch anyway. Jenny got the hot lunch once and she said the meatloaf was yucky. That's my girl. Marcus laughed, the sound echoing through the empty lobby. And do you know what the richest thing of all is? What, Daddy? How much I love you, and how proud I am of how smart and kind and brave you are. No amount of money in the world could buy the pride I feel when your teacher tells me you helped a new student feel welcome, or when you share your lunch with someone who forgot theirs, or when you work so hard on your homework even when it's difficult. Emma seemed satisfied with this answer, snuggling closer to her father with the contentment that came from feeling completely loved and secure. But Victoria noticed that Marcus's hands were shaking slightly as he reopened Emma's homework folder. She could see the weight of worry in his shoulders, the fear that he wasn't providing enough for his daughter, and the crushing responsibility he felt as Emma's sole protector in a world that could be harsh and unforgiving. Victoria thought about her own penthouse apartment overlooking Lake Michigan, her collection of luxury cars sitting in her private garage, her vacation homes in Aspen and the Hamptons that she visited maybe twice a year. She had everything money could buy: art collections, designer wardrobes, and investments that generated more money in a month than most people made in a year. But she'd never experienced the pure love and contentment she was witnessing between this father and daughter. She'd never had anyone look at her the way Emma looked at Marcus, with complete adoration, trust, and joy. Her own relationships had been complicated by questions of money, power, and mutual benefit. She couldn't remember the last time someone had loved her simply for who she was, without any consideration of what she could provide, or what advantage she might offer. As Emma drifted off to sleep against Marcus's chest around 11:30, he continued studying his own materials. Engineering journals he'd photocopied at the public library, professional development courses he'd downloaded for free from university websites, and practice problems for his PE exam that he worked through with the dedication of someone who still believed in the power of education to change his circumstances. Victoria watched him solve complex thermodynamics problems in the margins of his notebooks, his handwriting neat and precise despite working in dim lighting. She saw him reference formulas from memory and work through calculations that would challenge most practicing engineers. This man's mind was clearly as sharp as ever, perhaps even sharper for having been tested by real-world challenges that no textbook could have prepared him for. What Victoria did next would test every assumption Marcus had about rich people, about kindness, about whether the American dream was still possible for people like him, and about whether miracles really could happen to ordinary families just trying to survive with dignity and hope in an increasingly expensive world. Victoria spent the next 3 days conducting the most thorough investigation of her career, not into a potential business acquisition or market opportunity, but into the life and character of her night security guard and his remarkable daughter. She visited Emma's school, Riverside Elementary, posing as a potential donor interested in understanding the needs of the student body. What she learned from Emma's teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, broke her heart and solidified her growing respect for Marcus Thompson as both a father and a human being of extraordinary character. Emma is one of our brightest students, Mrs. Rodriguez explained as they sat in the colorful first-grade classroom decorated with student artwork and educational posters. Her reading comprehension is at a fourth-grade level, and her mathematical reasoning skills are simply exceptional for her age. But what makes her truly special is her kindness and empathy toward other children. Victoria learned that Emma consistently scored in the 98th percentile on standardized tests, despite having none of the educational advantages that many of her classmates enjoyed: no private tutoring, no educational software, no supplementary learning materials beyond what the school provided. She shares her lunch with kids who forget theirs, and she never complains about her worn clothes or supplies. Mrs. Rodriguez continued, "Last month, when we had a new student from El Salvador who spoke very little English, Emma spent every recess teaching her basic English words and helping her feel included. Emma has this remarkable ability to see when someone needs help and to provide it without making them feel embarrassed or different." Victoria discovered that Marcus volunteered at every school event, despite working 6 days a week. He helped with fundraisers, chaperoned field trips on his days off, and even used his engineering skills to fix broken playground equipment, all for free and without being asked. The school's maintenance budget had been cut by 30% the previous year, and Marcus had quietly stepped in to handle repairs that would have otherwise gone undone. He rebuilt our entire computer lab network last summer, Mrs. Rodriguez shared with obvious admiration. The district couldn't afford to hire an IT specialist, and our computers were constantly crashing. Marcus spent his vacation days rewiring the whole system and installing donated hardware that he somehow acquired and refurbished. He saved us at least $15,000 in professional fees. He never asked for help, though we've offered, Mrs. Rodriguez continued, her voice filled with respect and a touch of frustration. There's a pride in him, but not the bad kind, not arrogance or stubbornness. He just wants to handle things himself and to teach Emma that hard work and integrity will eventually be rewarded. Sometimes I worry that he's too optimistic about how fair the world really is. Victoria also discovered that Marcus had been quietly helping other struggling families in their apartment building. Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman Emma had mentioned, told Victoria how Marcus fixed her heater last winter when she couldn't afford a repair technician, and how he drove her to medical appointments when the city bus routes were too difficult for her to navigate with her walker. That young man is an angel, Mrs. Patterson said when Victoria visited her under the pretense of conducting a neighborhood safety survey. He never asks for anything in return, and he always makes sure Emma understands that helping others isn't something special, it's just what good people do for each other. That evening, Victoria made a decision that would change 3 lives forever. She spent an hour preparing for the conversation, rehearsing different approaches and trying to anticipate how Marcus might react to what she was about to propose. This wasn't like negotiating a business deal where she could rely on market analysis and financial projections. This was about human dignity, trust, and the delicate process of offering help to someone who had clearly been hurt by life, but hadn't allowed that hurt to make him bitter or cynical. She arrived at the corporate building at her usual time, but instead of hiding in her observation post, she walked directly to the security desk, with her heart pounding harder than it had during any board meeting or investor presentation. Marcus looked up in surprise as the perfectly dressed CEO of Sterling Enterprises approached him, her designer heels clicking against the marble floor. His professional instincts kicked in immediately, and Victoria could see him mentally reviewing the building's security protocols to determine if there might be an emergency or threat he should be aware of. "Good evening, Mrs. Sterling," he said, standing respectfully. "Is everything all right? Do you need access to your office, or is there a security concern I should be aware of?" "I need to talk to you," Victoria interrupted gently, her voice softer than her usual boardroom tone. "Both of you." Emma peeked out from behind her father, curious about this elegant woman who seemed so different from anyone they usually encountered in their daily lives. Victoria noticed that Emma's homework was spread across clean cardboard boxes that had been carefully reinforced and organized, and that Marcus had somehow acquired a small desk lamp, probably from the building's surplus supplies, to provide better lighting for their study sessions. "Sir, if I've done something wrong," Marcus began, his voice tight with the worry that came from years of having to be constantly vigilant about keeping his job. "You haven't done anything wrong, Marcus," Victoria said firmly. "In fact, you've done everything right. But I have a question for you, and I want you to be completely honest with me." Marcus straightened unconsciously, his protective instincts flaring as he placed himself slightly in front of Emma. Victoria could see that he was preparing himself for bad news, for another disappointment, for another door closing just when he'd begun to hope it might open. "If someone offered you a chance to change your life, to use that brilliant engineering mind of yours the way it was meant to be used, to give Emma everything she deserves and more, what would you say?" The question hung in the air like a challenge, like a test, like the first words of a fairy tale that might actually come true. Victoria watched Marcus's face carefully, seeing confusion, hope, disbelief, and wariness all competing for dominance in his expression. Marcus's answer would determine not just his own future and Emma's, but whether Victoria Sterling was about to become the guardian angel this family desperately needed, or just another wealthy person making empty promises to ease her own conscience. The next few minutes would test everything both of them believed about trust, opportunity, and the possibility that sometimes, in the darkest moments, life could surprise you with unexpected grace. Marcus stared at Victoria for a long moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, his engineering mind racing through possibilities, probabilities, and potential outcomes. This was the woman who owned half of downtown Chicago, whose business decisions affected thousands of lives, whose success story was taught in MBA programs across the country. Why was she here in the lobby of her own building at nearly midnight, talking to him like his answer actually mattered? "Mrs. Sterling," he said carefully, his voice steady despite the chaos of emotions churning in his chest. "I'm not sure I understand what you're asking. Are you offering me a different position within the security department?" because I want you to know that I'm grateful for this job, and I would never do anything to jeopardize. I'm not talking about security work, Marcus, Victoria interrupted gently. She knelt down to Emma's level, bringing herself to the little girl's height with the natural grace of someone accustomed to making others feel comfortable. Hi, sweetheart, I'm Victoria. What's your favorite subject in school? Science, Emma replied excitedly, her natural enthusiasm overcoming any shyness she might have felt. Daddy teaches me about planets and how things work and why the sky changes colors at sunset. He knows everything about everything. He's the smartest person in the whole world. I bet he is. Victoria smiled genuinely, charmed by Emma's complete confidence in her father. Then she looked back at Marcus, her expression becoming more serious and businesslike. I've been watching you both for several nights. I know about your Northwestern engineering degree, your graduate school acceptance to MIT, your situation with Emma's medical bills, and how incredibly hard you've been working to provide for your daughter while continuing your professional development. Marcus's face flushed with embarrassment and something that looked like panic. His first instinct was to protect his privacy and his dignity, both of which felt suddenly exposed and vulnerable. Ma'am, if you're concerned about Emma being here during my shifts, I can explain the situation. My babysitter quit unexpectedly, and I haven't been able to find affordable childcare that would work with my schedule. Emma doesn't interfere with my duties, and she's always asleep by midnight. I'm not concerned, Marcus. I'm impressed. Victoria stood, her business persona taking over as she recognized that this conversation required the same strategic thinking she used in high-stakes negotiations. But I have a proposition for you. My company is about to begin development on the largest sustainable energy project in the Midwest, a combination solar and wind facility that could power half of Illinois while reducing carbon emissions by 40%. We need a lead project engineer, someone brilliant, dedicated, innovative, and capable of solving complex problems with limited resources. Marcus felt his heart begin to race as he processed what she was saying. This couldn't be real. Things like this didn't happen to people like him. Not anymore. Not after 3 years of rejection letters and closed doors and well-meaning advice to be realistic about his options. Mrs. Sterling, I appreciate whatever this is, but I haven't worked as an engineer in over 4 years. My knowledge of current industry standards is outdated, my software certifications have expired, and I don't have recent references from engineering supervisors. Any HR department would reject my application before it reached an actual hiring manager. And you've been studying for your professional engineering license while working 60-hour weeks and raising a daughter alone, Victoria countered immediately. You've been teaching yourself advanced, sustainable energy concepts that most practicing engineers learn in expensive continuing education courses. You've been solving complex problems with creativity and resourcefulness that no textbook can teach. That tells me more about your character, your capability, and your potential value to my company than any traditional resume ever could. Emma tugged on Marcus's sleeve, her 6-year-old mind struggling to follow the adult conversation, but sensing that something important was happening. Daddy, what's she talking about? Are you going to get a new job? Victoria answered before Marcus could find his voice. I'm talking about giving your daddy a job where he can use his incredible brain to help make the world better by creating clean energy for lots and lots of people. And maybe, just maybe, helping you both get that house with the yellow door and the garden where you can plant sunflowers. Marcus felt the world spinning around him as the full implications of what Victoria was suggesting began to sink in. This wasn't just a job offer. This was the chance to reclaim the future he'd sacrificed for Emma's medical care, to use his education and training for their intended purpose, to provide Emma with opportunities he'd only been able to dream about for the past 3 years. But years of disappointment and financial stress had taught him to be cautious about hope, to protect himself and Emma from the devastation that came when possibilities proved to be illusions. There would be conditions, Victoria added, watching his face carefully. Several of them, actually. What conditions? Marcus asked, barely able to breathe as he waited for the catch, the limitation, the requirement that would make this opportunity as impossible as all the others had proven to be. First, you'll need to complete your PE certification within 6 months, which the company will pay for, including all study materials and examination fees. Second, you'll need to relocate to our Naperville facility, which means finding a new place to live. The company will cover all moving expenses and provide a housing allowance during the transition period. Marcus's mind reeled. These weren't obstacles. They were solutions to problems he'd been struggling with for months. Third, Victoria continued, her eyes twinkling with something Marcus couldn't quite identify. You'll have to let me take both of you shopping for some proper study supplies this weekend. Emma deserves better than cardboard boxes and makeshift lighting for her homework time. As Emma squealed with delight and threw her arms around Victoria's legs with the uninhibited joy that only children possess, Marcus felt tears he'd been holding back for 3 years finally begin to fall. But these weren't tears of exhaustion, frustration, or despair. They were tears of hope, gratitude, and the overwhelming realization that sometimes, when you least expect it and most need it, life can surprise you in the most beautiful and transformative way. There's one more thing, Victoria said softly, placing a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder as he struggled to process the magnitude of what was happening. The starting salary is $95,000 annually, with full medical benefits, 4 weeks paid vacation, and a contribution to Emma's college fund that begins immediately. Marcus felt his knees weaken as the number registered in his mind. It was more money than he'd made in the past 2 years combined. It was security, stability, and the chance to give Emma everything he'd dreamed of providing for her. What would happen next would test every assumption about class, kindness, opportunity, and whether fairy tales could come true in modern-day America. But for the first time in years, Marcus Thompson allowed himself to believe that maybe, just maybe, the future could be different than the past. 3 weeks had passed since that life-changing conversation in the lobby of Sterling Enterprises, and Marcus could barely recognize his own life. The transformation had been so swift and comprehensive that he sometimes wondered if he was living in a dream from which he might suddenly wake up back in the security office with Emma sleeping on cardboard boxes. Victoria had been true to every single promise she'd made that night. Within 48 hours of their conversation, Marcus had been officially hired as senior project engineer for the Midwest Sustainable Energy Initiative, with a starting date that allowed him 2 weeks to transition out of his security position and prepare for his new role. The HR department had processed his paperwork with unprecedented speed, and Marcus suspected that Victoria had personally ensured every obstacle was removed from his path. The shopping trip Victoria had insisted upon had been an experience that Emma would remember for the rest of her life. Victoria had arrived at their cramped one-bedroom apartment in Riverside that Saturday morning, driving a modest Honda Accord rather than the luxury vehicle Marcus had expected. "I don't want to overwhelm Emma," she'd explained with a smile. "This is about making her feel special, not making her feel different." They'd spent 4 hours at an educational supply store, where Emma had been given free rein to choose notebooks, pencils, markers, and educational games to her heart's content. Victoria had watched with obvious joy as Emma carefully selected each item, reading labels and asking thoughtful questions about how different supplies might help her learn more effectively. The 6-year-old's methodical approach to shopping, so much like her father's systematic problem-solving style, had clearly impressed Victoria. "She's going to be running a company someday," Victoria had whispered to Marcus as they watched Emma compare different types of calculators designed for elementary students. "Mark my words, that little girl has the mind of a born leader." But the shopping trip had been just the beginning. Victoria had also arranged for Marcus to meet with Dr. Jennifer Chen, Sterling Enterprises Director of Human Resources, who had worked with him to create a personalized study plan for his professional engineering certification. The company had enrolled him in an intensive review course that normally cost $3,000, provided him with the latest study materials and software, and arranged for him to take practice exams with other engineers in the company. "We're investing in your success," Dr. Chen had explained during their first meeting. "Mrs. Sterling believes you have the potential to become one of our most valuable team members, and we're going to provide you with every resource you need to prove her right." Now, as Marcus sat in his temporary office at Sterling's Naperville facility, reviewing technical specifications for solar panel installations, he felt a sense of professional fulfillment that he'd almost forgotten was possible. His desk, a real desk with proper lighting and an ergonomic chair, was covered with engineering drawings, environmental impact assessments, and cost-benefit analyses that reminded him why he'd fallen in love with this field in the first place. The Midwest Sustainable Energy Initiative was even more ambitious than Victoria had initially described. The project would create a 500-megawatt solar and wind facility capable of providing clean energy to over 200,000 homes, while creating 300 permanent jobs in rural Illinois communities that desperately needed economic development. Marcus's role was to oversee the technical integration of multiple renewable energy systems, ensuring maximum efficiency and minimal environmental impact. His new colleagues had welcomed him with genuine enthusiasm once they learned about his background and saw examples of his work. Dr. Sarah Kim, the project's environmental impact specialist, had been particularly impressed with Marcus's innovative ideas for minimizing habitat disruption during construction. "Your approach to phased installation is brilliant," she'd told him during their first project meeting. "Most engineers focus solely on technical efficiency, but you're thinking about ecological integration from the very beginning. That's exactly the kind of holistic thinking this project needs." Emma had adapted to their new circumstances with the resilience that had always amazed Marcus. Their new apartment in Naperville was a spacious 2-bedroom unit in a family-friendly complex with a playground, swimming pool, and an excellent school district. Emma's new room had everything Marcus had ever dreamed of providing for her: a proper desk with excellent lighting, bookshelves filled with age-appropriate educational materials, and even a small reading nook by the window where she could curl up with her favorite stories. "Daddy, I can't believe this is really our house," Emma had said on their first night in the new apartment, spinning around in her room with pure joy. "And tomorrow I get to go to a new school with a real science lab." Riverside Elementary had been sad to see Emma go, but Mrs. Rodriguez had been thrilled about the opportunities awaiting her star student. "Emma's new school has a gifted and talented program that will challenge her appropriately," she'd told Marcus during their farewell meeting. "She's going to thrive there, just like she thrived here despite having fewer resources to work with." But the most significant change in Marcus's life wasn't the salary increase or the professional recognition. It was the growing friendship he was developing with Victoria Sterling herself. What had begun as an employer-employee relationship was evolving into something deeper and more meaningful, a mutual respect and genuine caring that surprised both of them. Victoria had begun stopping by Marcus's office every few days, ostensibly to check on the project's progress, but really to hear about Emma's adjustment to her new school and Marcus's experience returning to engineering work. These conversations often stretched beyond business matters, as they discovered shared interests in environmental sustainability, educational reform, and the challenges facing single parents in America. "You know," Victoria had said during one of these visits, "watching Emma blossom in her new environment has reminded me why I started this company in the first place. It wasn't about building wealth. It was about creating opportunities for people to use their talents to make the world better." Marcus had learned that Victoria's motivation for helping his family went far deeper than mere charity or corporate social responsibility. She had grown up poor herself, the daughter of a single mother who had worked multiple jobs to provide basic necessities. Victoria's success hadn't made her forget those struggles. It had intensified her awareness of how random circumstances could determine whether talented people got the chances they deserved. "My mother died when I was 15. Victoria had shared one evening as they reviewed project timelines. "She never got to see me graduate from high school, let alone build this company. But she taught me that success means nothing if you don't use it to lift other people up. You and Emma have reminded me of that lesson." As Marcus prepared to leave the office that evening, he reflected on how dramatically his life had changed and how much more change was still to come. Tomorrow, Emma would be starting her new school, and he would be presenting his preliminary designs for the solar installation to Sterling's board of directors. 6 months ago, he couldn't have imagined either of those things would ever be possible, but as he packed up his engineering materials and prepared to head home to help Emma with her homework at a real desk with proper lighting, Marcus realized that the most important transformation wasn't in his professional circumstances or living situation. It was in his renewed sense of hope and possibility, the belief that hard work, integrity, and a little bit of unexpected kindness could still change lives in ways that seemed miraculous, but were really just what happened when people chose to see and respond to each other's humanity. What Marcus didn't know was that Victoria had been planning something even more significant than a job offer or a better living situation, something that would test the depth of their growing friendship and reveal just how far Victoria was willing to go to ensure that Emma had every advantage she deserved in life. Emma's first day at Meadowbrook Elementary School exceeded even Marcus's most optimistic expectations. The gifted and talented program that Mrs. Rodriguez had mentioned proved to be everything they had hoped for and more. Emma's new teacher, Ms. Patricia Foster, was a veteran educator with a master's degree in gifted education who immediately recognized Emma's exceptional abilities and unique learning style. "Your daughter is remarkable," Ms. Foster told Marcus during their first parent conference, just 2 weeks after Emma had started at the new school. Her reading comprehension is at a 7th grade level, but what's even more impressive is her emotional intelligence and her ability to help other students learn. She's a natural teacher. Marcus learned that Emma had quickly become the unofficial classroom helper, patiently working with struggling students during reading time and explaining math concepts to classmates who were having difficulty. Her teachers were amazed by her ability to break down complex ideas into simple, understandable terms, a skill she'd clearly learned from watching her father explain engineering concepts during their late-night study sessions. "She reminds me of you," Victoria observed one evening when she stopped by Marcus's office to hear about Emma's latest academic achievements. That same methodical approach to problem-solving, the same patience with people who learn differently, the same genuine joy in discovering how things work. Victoria had become a regular presence in their lives, but not in the way Marcus had initially expected. Rather than maintaining the formal distance typical of CEO-employee relationships, Victoria had gradually become something closer to a family friend. She remembered Emma's favorite books, asked about her science projects, and even attended Emma's first school play, where Emma had played a tree in the environmental conservation pageant. "I've never had anyone outside of family show this much interest in Emma's life," Marcus had confided to his neighbor Mrs. Patterson, who had moved to a senior living facility near their new apartment. "Sometimes I wonder if Victoria sees something in Emma that reminds her of herself as a child." Mrs. Patterson, now 84 but still sharp as ever, had smiled knowingly. "That woman isn't just interested in Emma, son, she's interested in both of you. I've lived long enough to recognize when someone has found a family they didn't know they were looking for." Meanwhile, Marcus's work on the Midwest Sustainable Energy Initiative was earning recognition throughout Sterling Enterprises and beyond. His innovative approach to integrating solar panels with existing agricultural land, allowing farmers to continue growing crops while generating renewable energy, had caught the attention of the Department of Energy. Dr. Kim had submitted Marcus's preliminary designs to a national competition for sustainable energy innovation, and the project had been selected as one of 10 finalists nationwide. This could put Sterling Enterprises at the forefront of agricultural solar integration research, Victoria explained to Marcus during a celebration dinner she'd organized at a family-friendly restaurant that Emma would enjoy. "Your work isn't just solving our project challenges, it's pioneering solutions that could be replicated across the entire Midwest." Emma, now comfortable enough with Victoria to treat her like a beloved aunt, had listened to these adult conversations with fascination. "Daddy's making the world better with science," she announced proudly to their waitress. "And someday I'm going to be a scientist too, and we'll work together to make sure all the polar bears have enough ice." Victoria had laughed at Emma's environmental enthusiasm, but Marcus noticed that she made a note in her phone about educational programs focused on climate science for elementary students. Victoria never forgot details about things that mattered to Emma, and her attention to his daughter's interests had become one of the things Marcus valued most about their evolving relationship. The professional recognition Marcus was receiving had also opened doors he'd never expected to walk through. The University of Illinois had invited him to guest lecture in their renewable energy engineering program, sharing his experiences with agricultural solar integration. Northwestern University, his alma mater, had asked him to serve on an advisory committee for their Sustainable Energy Research Lab. "It's remarkable how quickly the engineering community has embraced your work," Dr. Chen observed during one of their monthly check-ins. "You've been back in active practice for less than 3 months, but you're already being recognized as a thought leader in your field." But perhaps the most significant change in Marcus's life was the growing confidence and optimism that Emma displayed every day. The little girl who had once asked if they were poor now talked excitedly about her future plans to study environmental science, to travel to different countries to learn about renewable energy, and to help her father design solar systems that would make electricity affordable for everyone. "Daddy, Ms. Foster says I'm smart enough to skip 2nd grade and go right to 3rd grade next year," Emma announced one evening as they worked together on her homework, now spread across a proper desk in her own room with excellent lighting and all the supplies she could ever need. "But I told her I want to stay with my friends and be the best 2nd grader I can be first." Marcus felt his heart swell with pride as he realized that Emma was learning not just academic skills but life skills, the importance of loyalty to friends, the value of patience and steady progress, and the confidence to make her own decisions about her educational path. "That sounds like a very wise choice, Em," he told her. "There's no rush to grow up. You're perfect exactly as you are right now." What Marcus didn't realize was that Victoria had been having similar conversations with Emma during their private moments together, talks about dreams, goals, and possibilities that would shape Emma's understanding of what she could achieve in life. Victoria was becoming more than an employer or even a family friend. She was becoming a mentor, a role model, and something Emma had never had before, a successful woman who believed in her potential and was willing to invest in her future. The bond forming between Victoria and Emma would soon lead to a conversation that would challenge Marcus's independence, test his trust in Victoria's motives, and ultimately reveal the depth of commitment Victoria was prepared to make to ensure Emma had every opportunity to fulfill her remarkable potential.